Hello, I'm Harrison, the English Confidence Coach, and welcome to my channel. Today, I'm going to teach you all you need to know about those tricky modal verbs. And at the end of this video, you will realize that modal verbs aren't nearly as difficult as you thought before. So make sure you watch to the end so you fully understand modal verbs. So let's get into it. What are modal verbs? Well, modal verbs show the listener possibility, intent, ability, or necessity of something that's being spoken about. If you use only a modal verb in your sentence and didn't include the second verb, the listener will be waiting for you to finish your sentence because the sentence doesn't sound complete in English. The most common modal verbs in English are can, would, and must. So how are modal verbs used? Modal verbs are used to express hypothetical conditions such as advice, capability, or requests. And modal verbs are kind of auxiliary verbs and are extremely important in adding clarity to your sentences in English. You can think of modal verbs as a sort of helper verb and are always followed by another verb. So whenever you want to use a modal verb, are always used alongside the second verb or the main verb in a sentence. Remember, modal verbs are auxiliary or helper verbs, so you can't use them on their own. And if you do use them on their own, the sentence will sound incomplete. The only exception when a modal verb can be used alone is when it's clear from the conversation what the main verb is. However, this happens very, very rarely, and you should always include the main verb or the second verb when using them. So let's see an example of a sentence with a modal verb and without a modal verb. Think of the difference. I run every morning and I can run every morning. Do you know the difference between these two sentences? The first sentence is a simple fact. The speaker is telling the listener they run every morning. That's it. However, in the second example, you might have noticed the modal verb can in the sentence. Did you notice how the use of this simple word changed the meaning of the sentence slightly? Unlike in the first example, the speaker does not run every day. The speaker is simply saying, by including the word can, that it's a possibility for them to run every morning if they wanted to or needed to. The speaker is talking about a hypothetical situation, whereas in the first sentence, the speaker is telling something that is happening right now. In the second sentence, the speaker is talking about something that could happen in the future. You've probably seen English modal verbs all the time. You might have even used them without thinking. The most frequently used modal verbs are can, may, might, could, should, will. There are more modal verbs out there, but those are the ones which are most commonly used and you're most likely to use in everyday conversations in English. There are a few modal verbs that are considered outdated and are very rarely used outside of books and are almost never used in spoken English. And they are shall and dare, as in dare I say. Some modal verbs are used in specific conditions. For example, need to, got to, have to are used to express that someone needs to do something, necessity. If you want a video of me teaching you all the modal verbs in English, make sure you hit that like button. So when are modal verbs used? And what special conditions do modal verbs show? Likelihood. How likely something will happen. The modal verbs should and must are used to show how likely something will happen. Oftentimes, Some things appear likely they will happen, but we don't know for sure yet. In these cases, you should use these two modal verbs to show the probability of something happening without the certainty or without knowing whether it will happen. For example, his parents must be so proud of him. In this sentence, we're using must in order to show that we think his parents will be proud of him, but we don't know yet. Next example, my baby brother should be asleep by now. Again, in this sentence, like in the first one, we don't know if the baby is asleep. So we use should in order to tell the listener we don't know yet, or the likelihood of something, in this case sleep, happening. The next condition of when a modal verb is used is in situations when something is possible but not certain, similar to the first one. In this case, we use could, may, or might. Judging by the clouds, it may rain tonight. In this example, we think there's a strong possibility it will rain, but we're not sure. So we use might. She may become the youngest football player ever. Similarly to the first example, we don't know if she is the youngest football player, but we think there's a strong possibility she is. These verbs show there is a strong possibility of something happening. It's most likely it's true, but we're not sure yet. The next condition for when you use a modal verb is ability, or whether the subject of the sentence is able to do something, such as perform an action or demonstrate the ability to do something. And in this case, we use only can. Likewise, the negative forms are can't or cannot, and these show that the subject of the sentence can't do something or is unable to do something. She can speak 3 languages. In this example, we're showing that she, the subject of the sentence, is able to speak or has the ability to speak 3 languages. If you want to negate this sentence, you can say she cannot speak 3 languages. And in this example, we're saying she can't speak 3 languages. The next condition in which a modal verb is used is if you want to ask permission to do something. This can be anything, walking through a door, anything. Whenever you're asking permission to do something, you use can, may, or could. Traditionally, the more formal and polite usage is may or could. These options are better for asking permission than can. However, in modern usage, can is perfectly acceptable for asking permission to do something. May I leave early today? Can I go to the bathroom? Could I play too? In all these examples, we're asking permission to do something. The next condition you use a modal verb is in request. Whenever you want to ask someone else to do something, you start your question with every time will, would, can, or could. For example, would you get that box off the top shelf, please? Will you turn down the music? And the next condition you use a modal verb with is with suggestion or advice. Whenever you want to recommend someone something without it seeming like a command, like you're telling them to do it. These are the perfect modal verbs to use when you want to express this. And you use the modal verb should. You should try lasagna. That guy should wear less cologne. In both these examples, we're giving advice on a situation. We're not telling anyone to do anything, it's just our opinion. And the next condition is a command. If you want to tell someone to do something or give a command, you can use the modal verbs have to, must, need, or got to. You must wash your hands before cooking. You need to go to bed before 8 o'clock. In both of these examples, we're telling someone else what to do. Modal verbs can also express necessity or obligation. Likewise, the negative form of these modal verbs expresses when an action isn't necessary. You use the same modal verbs when giving a command, when expressing necessity or obligation. Must, have to, got to, need to. We have to wait for our bosses to open their restaurant. You don't need to come if you don't want to. In both of these examples, we're expressing obligation or necessity, that someone must do something or not do something, but we're not telling anyone what they must do. The next condition you use modal verbs with is habit. When someone or something does something every single day, regularly. This is an action that's ongoing and that the subject does regularly. In this case, you can use would for past tense and will for the present and future tenses. The modal verb used to can also be used in the past tense when an action has completed, when you're talking about a habit that no longer exists anymore. I will arrive early and leave late every day for work. In this example, we're expressing a habit, a schedule or routine that this person does every day. When I used to live alone, I used to wake up every morning for work. In this example, we're talking about a habit or regularly done action that no longer exists. This person used to wake up early for work, but now doesn't any longer. Here are some simple rules to remember when using modal verbs. Modal verbs come directly before the main verb. For example, I must go. With modal verbs, the indefinite, so the to, for example, to go, to see, isn't included in the main verb. For example, I will see, not I will to see. It's always modal verb, main verb, but without the to. In questions, you still use the indefinite form of the main verb, but the order of the sentence is different. So if you want to form a question using a modal verb, you use this formula. Modal verb, subject, main verb, rest of the sentence. For example, I can eat 2 whole pizzas. If you want to turn this sentence into a question, move the modal verb to the first position. Can. The subject I will be moved to the second position. Can I? This is followed by the main verb eat. Can I eat? And then the rest of the sentence. 2 whole pizzas. So let's see an example. Can, modal verb, you eat a whole. That's it. That's how you construct a sentence using a modal verb. How are you feeling about modal verbs now? Do they seem a little less confusing? Do you feel a bit better about using them now? Let's practice using modal verbs by answering this question. What would you do if you could sound like a native speaker in any language? Practice modal verbs in the comment section replying to this question. Please don't forget to get my free guide that will give you even more English tips, tricks, and advice for speeding up your English progress. Now, at this point of the video, I've taught you how to better understand and use modal verbs in English. But what I want you to do now is watch this video where I'll teach you 8 phrasal verbs you can use for shopping, plus a free bonus word. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video and want even more free English lessons just like this, make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell, smash that like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.